The first sound was faint, recorded by the USS Holland, a deep-sea reconnaissance sub trailing 320 nautical miles off the Mariana Trench. Crew of 6. Calm waters. No activity. Routine mission. Then the bellow came. Low. Vibrational. Not like a whale. Not seismic. Something else. Something closer. Sonar didn't register it. But the crew heard it. Not through instruments. Through their bones. The captain's last log. Sound felt like it came from inside the hull. Inside us. We felt it breathing. The sub surfaced 11 minutes later. 3 crew missing. The remaining 3 wouldn't speak. Just sat silently, ears bleeding, humming a single note, unwavering, low and wet. It wasn't the only incident. 2 weeks later, a cargo ship in the Arctic Circle reported its anchor chain vibrating violently, despite still waters and no current. When they pulled it in, the metal was hot to the touch. And at the bottom? A tooth. Black. Polished. As long as a forearm. Then came the whispers. Not out at sea, but on shore. Beachgoers in Maine, Iceland, Japan, they began to hear the tides speaking. Not in words. Not at first. Just breath. Patterns. The sense that something was waiting. And then the tides started pulling. No one believed the first video. A girl at Bondi Beach in Australia steps toward the water, hesitates 2 feet from the edge. Her hair lifts. Wind? No. Suction. She stumbles backward, but something pulls her forward. Her heels dig into the sand, leaving drag marks behind. She screams, but doesn't fall. She's lifted, pulled straight into the waves, gone before she hits the surface. That was the beginning. The water was changing. Not just tides. Not just current. Behavior. And no one knew why. But everyone felt it. Especially me. Because the whispers didn't start at the ocean. They started in my bathtub. It started with the faucet. Dripping. Not in the way old pipes leak, but in rhythm. 3 drop. Pause. 1 drop. Pause. 3 drops again. Over and over. Like a pattern. Like Morse code. I wouldn't have noticed if I wasn't already on edge. Everyone was. After the Bondi Beach video, there was a weird silence across the internet. Less mocking, more listening. Watching. Waiting. Something had shifted. And we all felt it, even if we didn't want to admit it. But when I heard that dripping, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was intentional. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment 4 blocks from the coast. Not beachfront, but close enough to hear the waves on quiet night. I used to love that. Now it made me twitch. Because lately, the waves hadn't sounded right. They didn't crash. They breathed. When I lay in bed, I'd hear them inhaling slowly, wetly, like lungs coated in salt. There were whispers in the draw of the tide, soft, too soft to catch. I turned up the fan. I turned on podcasts. I did everything to drown them out. But the water got closer. It showed up in my tub. The first time, I chalked it up to bad plumbing. I hadn't used the tub in weeks, but there it was, half full. The water perfectly still. Not a ripple, not a speck of dust. I drained it. It came back. Same level. Same silence. No smell, no color, just there. The third time, I didn't drain it right away. I crouched beside it and watched. It stared back. I know how that sounds, but that's what it felt like. Like the water was aware of me. Like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do. I dipped a finger in. It was cold. Colder than it should have been. Colder than any tap water. Colder than ice. And it felt deep. I can't explain it. But that little pool in my tub? It felt bottomless. Like if I dropped something in, I'd never hear it hit the bottom. I pulled my finger back, dried it. The water didn't ripple. I didn't sleep that night. 3 days later, I got the package. No return address. No markings. Just a small, square box sitting on my doorstep. My name was scrawled in thick, wet ink across the top. It hadn't been there when I left for coffee. I live on the 2nd floor. No one buzzed. No one knocked. Inside was a waterproof bag. Inside that, a journal. It was moldy. warped by age and water damage. The pages stuck together. But the cover had a name. SS Calypsis. I googled it. No record. Nothing. Not even a whisper. I opened the first page. The handwriting was jagged, slanted. Some of the ink had bled, but I could make out the words. If you're reading this, the sea has already chosen you. I sat on my kitchen floor and read the whole thing. It wasn't a story. It was a confession. The writer had served as a communications officer aboard the Calypsis, a research vessel supposedly lost in 1979. Their last mission had taken them to an uncharted patch of ocean west of the Azores. Coordinates were included. That's where it began. Deep sonar pings had failed. They picked up nothing, but the crew heard something. A vibration through the hull. A low, bellowing moan that came and went at irregular intervals. Half the crew thought it was mechanical. The others thought it was alive. Then the hallucinations started. Voices in the pipes. Water pooling where it shouldn't. Crew members drawn to the lower decks, reporting that they heard someone calling from the deep. They tried to turn back, but the sea wouldn't let them. The tides shifted violently. Weather changed in seconds. Instruments failed. And one by one, they began disappearing. Not overboard, just gone. 1 minute there. The next, no trace. Clothes left behind. Food half eaten. Like they'd stood up mid-sentence and stepped into nothing. The writer had been the last. They sealed the journal in plastic, stuffed it in a buoyant container, and tossed it into the sea. In the final entry, they wrote, "If this reaches land, then the deep has decided it's time again. There's no stopping it, only delaying. Whatever it is, it doesn't come from below. It comes from within the water itself." I locked every faucet in my apartment, shut off the main valve. Still, the tub filled. Still, the whispers came. Still, the air grew damp, thicker, harder to breathe. My windows fogged from the inside. My carpet grew damp, not wet, damp, like it was absorbing something from the air. That night, I heard something slosh in the bathroom. Not drip, slosh. I didn't move. I stayed in bed, covers pulled to my throat, every muscle tight as wire. The sound came again. Then a third time, closer. When I finally forced myself to look, the hallway was dark. But the floor was wet. There were footprints, trailing from the bathroom, stopping right at my bedroom door. I packed a bag that morning. Clothes, batteries, my old field recorder, the journal. I needed to leave, go inland, find higher ground. But something held me in place. Not fear. Curiosity. That's what the water wanted. Not panic. Obedience. The whispers grew louder. And in them I started to hear language. Broken syllables. Not English. Not anything I knew. But familiar. Like a song I'd heard in a dream long ago. They weren't calling out. They were learning how to speak. And they were using me to practice. I stood in front of the tub one last time. The water was perfectly still. I leaned close, and my reflection didn't match me. It blinked first, smiled second, and then whispered, "We remember the first flood." The sky forgot, but we did not. My feet locked in place. My breath froze in my throat. Then the water surged upward. Not spilled. Surged. It reached for me. I ran. Not far. Just to the hallway. The door slammed behind me. From the other side, I heard water running. Splashes, footsteps, and laughter. Laughter made of bubbles and breath. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually, it stopped. When I opened the door, the tub was empty. The floor was dry. The journal was gone. In its place, scrawled on the bathroom mirror in droplets that refused to evaporate, was a new message. "The tides have remembered your name." The news broke at 3:17 a.m. A live broadcast, meant to be coverage of a lunar eclipse off the west coast, cut to chaos. The shoreline behind the anchor began to shift. Not rise, not flood, move. Like the water was turning in place, spiraling, building a pattern. Then it reached. Hands of water, arms, faces that didn't have bones. They surged toward the camera. The feed cut to static, but not before the last frame showed a ripple of people being pulled into the tide. Not by waves, by intention. By sunrise, the footage was scrubbed. News outlets retracted the segment. Social media flagged reposts as AI hoaxes. But it was real. And the tide didn't stop there. Reports rolled in from every continent. Cape Town. 2 fishermen pulled backward off the docks, their boats untouched. The ocean boiled where they vanished. Copenhagen. Children playing on the beach stopped and turned in unison to stare at the sea. Then walked into it, calm, deliberate. Seattle. The Puget Sound receded 30 feet. A moment of awe. Then it inhaled. No survivors. I hadn't left my apartment in 3 days. Not out of fear. Because I couldn't. Every faucet was dry, but the air was thick, damp, heavy with presence. The TV wouldn't stay on one channel. It kept flipping back to static. Then sound. Voices whispering through the white noise. Sometimes mine. Sometimes others I'd never heard before, whispering words that didn't exist but meant something anyway. I wrote them down. They formed sentences, not warnings, instructions. The sky will forget, but the breath remembers. Walk backward into the waves. Close your eyes. Listen. I started dreaming again. Each night I drown, but not in the ocean, in air. Air that had become too saturated, too wet, too full of memory. I could see cities beneath my feet, but they weren't underwater. They were breathing. Skyscrapers pulsing like lungs. Street lights flickering in Morse code. Every window a mouth. Every cloud a face. Watching. Waiting. And somewhere deep beneath it all, something listening. Then the dreams turned shared. I wasn't the only one. Forums erupted. Reddit. Discord. Pirate radio. People were having the same visions, the same phrases, the same symbols scrawled in condensation on their windows. We are the water's memory. The bellow is not a call. It is a return. One man in Montana posted a live feed of his sink. The basin filled slowly. No plumbing. Just liquid appearing from nowhere. Inside it, a face. Smiling. Thousands watched live as the feed cut. No one's heard from him since. Inland cities were no longer safe. People started hearing tides in places with no water. Deserts reported mist at dawn. Mountains reported fog that whispered names. I got a message from a woman in Kansas who said her dog refused to walk on tile floors. She lifted a corner of the linoleum in her kitchen and found seaweed. Wet. Fresh. I started receiving packages again. Not boxes. Jars. Sealed tightly. Inside each one water. Slightly glowing. And always, a scrap of paper taped to the lid. For when the air forgets to drown. I didn't open them. I didn't throw them out. I just kept them. Some part of me knew they were important. That they were alive. Then the first inland disappearance happened. Denver. A man mowing his lawn stopped, walked to the middle of his yard, looked up at the sky, and vanished. No noise. No struggle. No trace. The grass where he'd stood was wet. The soil beneath it, saturated with salt. That night I stood in my shower, dry, lights off, and I asked aloud, "What do you want?" The tiles trembled, my reflection rippled, and the drain exhaled. Just once. A single warm breath, like the ocean was sighing, or waking up. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. At 3:33 a.m. I heard the laughter again. Not children. Not joy. Just wet air pretending to remember how people laugh. And it was getting better at it. I joined the signal chat. Thousands of us now. People who saw the signs. Who remembered the dreams. We weren't theorizing anymore. We were preparing. Because something was coming. Not a wave. Not a flood. A return. And the sea wasn't coming for the land. It was calling back what it had forgotten it left behind. I stopped trusting reflections, not just in mirrors, but in windows, water, metal, anything that showed me back to myself. Because the thing looking out wasn't me anymore. Not always. Sometimes it blinked too slow. Sometimes it moved when I didn't. Sometimes it smiled when I was afraid. And one night it whispered, "We remember you." The jars in my apartment began to hum. Softly, in sync, like tuning forks, like something beneath them was trying to surface. One of them cracked. The water inside turned black, thick as ink, and from the paper beneath it, new words formed. "Speak our name and we'll stop knocking." I didn't speak, but I thought about it, and I think that was enough. Language began to shift. People noticed it first in text. News headlines rearranged themselves seconds after publication. Not typos, transformations. Heat wave claims 12 lives in New Orleans became warmth returns home to the 12. Search for missing swimmers expands along coastline became the sea gathers its kin. No one admitted it was happening, but every writer I knew started using simpler words, fewer metaphors, avoiding certain letters without knowing why. Whispers don't like consonant. They prefer vowels. I watched a live stream from Portugal. A poet stood at the shoreline, reading verses written in water-damaged ink. The ocean behind him churned, not violently, expectantly. With each stanza, the tide inched closer. When he finished, he stepped into the surf and vanished. No splash, no panic, just gone. The comments were disabled before the feed ended, but one remained. We understood every word. Please send more. My own words started disappearing. I'd write a sentence in my journal. Return minutes later, it was blank. My audio recorder picked up hours of silence, punctuated by a wet shuffling and a voice softly repeating my thoughts before I said them. I stopped documenting, started listening, and that's when I heard the chorus. It came at 4 a.m., a long, deep breath through every drain, pipe, gutter, and crack in the walls. Then a voice, not loud, not angry, just patient. Return to the mouth. That's what it called the sea. The mouth. Not a body. A being. Not a place. A wound. I tried to leave. Packed everything. Stepped outside. And the world felt wrong. Everything too still. The sky too pale. The cars on the street weren't parked. They were watching. The air tasted like brine. The trees swayed without wind. And every person I passed whispered one word under their breath. Almost. Like I was close to something. Like they knew. Back in my apartment, I found the bathroom door open again. Inside, the tub had filled itself once more. But not with water. With faces. Hundreds. Drifting just beneath the surface. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. All of them mouthed the same phrase. Remember the first breath. I fell to the floor. Not passed out, dragged. By memory. Or what they used as memory. I saw the beginning. Not of earth. Not of man. But of awareness. The sea didn't create us. It noticed us. We were accidents of moisture and decay. And then we made stories. And the sea listened. And now it wants to speak. I woke up covered in salt. The windows were dripping. Not with rain. With condensation from breath. Something had been inside. And it left one last message on the mirror. When your mouth forgets how to lie, we'll begin again. The first town disappeared on a Monday. Gravelton, Oregon. Population 3,402. It wasn't a flood. It wasn't a sinkhole. It wasn't anything the emergency alert systems were built for. It was a softening. That's the only word witnesses used. The town softened, like warm wax melting under a breath. Roads blurred. Buildings lost their angles. Street signs twisted into wet ribbons of copper and bone. And then the fog came. Heavy. Not white, but blue. A deep, humming blue that buzzed in your chest more than your ears. When the mist cleared 3 minutes later, Gravelton was gone. Not destroyed. Erased. Grass grew over the absence. The road ended in smooth silence. GPS still showed the town. Weather apps still tracked its temperature. But no one who went looking for it came back. Not even their names stayed. I stopped speaking aloud for a while. I felt watched every time I said a word. like the sound was being measured, archived. One night, I caught my voice recorder whispering back to me, not playing anything I'd said, something new. It said, "Each sentence is a shape. We are building a body." The jars cracked again, all at once. I didn't hear them shatter, I felt it, like a pressure wave through the walls of my skull. Water ran down the shelves, but didn't pool. It climbed, up the walls, across the ceiling, until it formed a shape, a vertical slit, a mouth. It whispered one word, "Welcome." Then it collapsed. The walls were dry. The room was dry. But the back of my tongue tasted like rust. People on the forums started disappearing. Not banned, not logged off. Their usernames remained. But their posts changed. The tone was off. Too fluid. Too thirsty. One guy, Foam Spine, wrote, "I stopped resisting. It's quieter this way. Let the flood make you smooth." Another simply wrote, "Remember, language is a dam, and we're building pressure." Then nothing. Just a blinking cursor. A cursor that started to blink in pulses. Morse code. I translated it. Soon we won't need mouths. The next missing town was inland. Shelter Brook, Nebraska. No rivers. No lakes. No ocean. Still the sea came. Not in water, but in echo. Phone lines rang endlessly. Every call was the same. Static, followed by a low breath. Then a voice, your own voice, saying something you hadn't thought yet. Survivors reported black puddles forming under doors. Not water. Memory. Liquid thoughts congealing in corners. And always the sound of distant whale song in empty bathtubs. I dreamed of the mouth again. This time it opened. Not wide, but long. Like a crack across the planet. It sang. And from it spilled not water, but us. Copies, echoes, people I'd seen on the street, the internet, my memories, all walking backwards into the surf, smiling, bleeding salt from their eyes. When I woke, my floor was wet, not damp, wet. The jars were gone, replaced with stones, smooth, black, breathing. One cracked open before my eyes. Inside, a tongue. It didn't speak, but my head filled with a phrase I didn't want. Speak the flood. Become the mouth. I haven't left in 5 days. My food's gone. Water, too. I don't need it anymore. Not like before. The air feeds me now. The fog lingers outside my window. It hums. And when I hum back, it answers. Not with words. With recognition. Like I'm finally speaking the right frequency. Like it's saying, "We hear you. You are learning to dissolve." I wasn't the first to see it, but I was one of the last who still had words for it. The shape. It formed off the coast of Morocco first, then Sri Lanka, then Nova Scotia. Each time, it rose slowly from the water, not a beast, not a ship, not anything so simple. A form, too tall for clouds, too thin for matter. It shimmered like wet paper, not solid, not ghost. It cast no shadow, reflected nothing, and yet it was visible in every direction, like it existed inside the eye, not outside it. They called it the column, not because of its shape, though it was long and vertical, but because of what it did to sound. Every time it appeared, all noise ceased. Birds dropped silent from the sky. Waves froze mid-break, and the moment you saw it, you couldn't scream, because there was no air to scream through. I saw it from my window, not near the coast, over the street outside my building. It rose through the pavement without breaking it, stretching upward into the night sky until it faded into the stars like it had always been there. It pulsed once. A single wave of pressure hit me, like a wet heartbeat inside my chest. Then the lights in my apartment dimmed, not flickered. Dimmed like someone was breathing them in, and the walls began to sweat. Salt water. I collapsed, not from pain, from remembrance. The moment the column touched the sky above my neighborhood, I remembered things I never lived. Other oceans, other drownings, other selves. In every memory I was underwater, surrounded by others, all versions of me, drifting together like kelp, and each one whispered a different word into the water. Together, they formed a sentence I couldn't understand. But the sea did, and it opened. I woke to my neighbor knocking. He stood in the hallway with wide eyes, holding a tape recorder. "It talked to me," he whispered. "In my drain." I let him in. We listened to the tape. It was 30 seconds of silence. Then his voice played back. Not anything he had said. Just his voice saying, "Let the water inside. We're trying to come home." He ran before the recording ended. I haven't seen him since. Online, the groups fractured. Some begged for help. Others preached merging. They called themselves the Remembered. They said resisting was selfish. That we had all belonged to the water once. That the air was an accident. That breath was borrowed. Their posts were written in fluid syntax. Sentences that bent and shimmered, constantly rewording themselves as you read them. One message never changed. The mouth does not punish. It invites. Cities along the Mississippi began disappearing. Not underwater. Just gone. The river would ripple. Fog would rise. And then there'd be nothing. Satellite footage blurred the moment it approached those coordinates. Drones malfunctioned. Boats sank. Only one video survived. A short clip, posted anonymously, showing a man standing at the river's edge. He looks into the lens and says, "You don't need to swim. You just need to stop remembering where your lungs are." Then he smiles and walks into the mist. His body unravels before he reaches the water. I've stopped hearing normal sounds. No cars. No wind. Just a steady pulse behind the walls. It follows my heart. Or maybe it's teaching it a new rhythm. I dreamed last night that I breathed in reverse, and the ocean applauded. I found new writing on my walls. Not from me. Not from any hand. Just there. One line at a time. Now they read. When enough mouths forget silence, we will have shape. The column is not coming. It is remembering how to stand. You are already submerged. The bath filled again. Not with water. With names. I saw them forming beneath the surface, spiraling like plankton, glowing dimly. My name was there. So was yours. So was everyone's. Names that don't exist yet. Names that haven't learned how to breathe. They're waiting. We're all waiting. It started with forgetfulness. First, the small things, birthdays, appointments, passwords. Then it spread deeper. One morning, I walked to the grocery store and realized halfway there I couldn't remember my mother's face. I tried to picture her. Her voice, her hands, the way she laughed. Nothing. I checked my phone. No photos. No messages. No contact saved with her name. I asked my neighbor about her. He smiled politely and said, "You've always lived alone." But I hadn't. Had I? People began disappearing, not in body, but in memory. Friends I'd known for years. Gone from social media. Mentions of them deleted. Photos edited. Entire comments threads rewritten like they'd never existed. A man posted a video screaming about how his daughter vanished from their home while she slept. Not her body, her presence. Her room had turned into a storage closet. Her photos were blank. No one else remembered her name. Even he started to forget. The video cut off with him sobbing. What if I'm next? And then I woke up to find my own name changed. On my mail. My ID. Even the spine of my notebooks. Instead of Jordan, everything now read. Mouthborn. I don't sleep anymore. Not really. Not like before. I close my eyes and drift through layers of mist and memory. The mouth speaks there. Not in words. In reversals. Moments played backward. Waves crashing up onto the shore. Voices receding into silence. Each night it says the same thing, now. You are almost smooth. The world above is breaking. Not physically, but linguistically. The names of places shift hourly. Newspapers use strange terms. Weather melt, wind depth, ocean fall. Time zones collapse into tides. Dates loop. March 3rd repeats for 6 days straight. No one complains. We're forgetting how. The remembered walk among us openly now. You can tell by their eyes, glassy as if they're looking through you. Their speech flows without pause. No hesitation, no breath. They don't blink often. They hum when it rains, and they leave behind puddles where they stand. At night, they light candles and face the closest body of water. Even fountains, even puddles, even bathtubs, they murmur one sentence together. We are almost opened. On the forums, someone posted coordinate. Deep in the Atlantic, marked as the teeth. No maps acknowledge it. No satellites return data. Just a black zone. A column of unknowing. Boats sent their vanish. Sonar returns echoes of their own scans before they were sent. As if time there remembers you before you arrive. A small town in northern Canada went silent. Every resident posted the same message on social media. We have been unspoken. And then silence. Complete blackout. Phones rang with only one tone when dialed. A low, vibrating moan. Identical across every line. Identical to the first sound the USS Holland heard. The one that began it all. I stood in front of my mirror this morning and said my name. Nothing happened. I said it again. And again. Then the mirror whispered back. You are the last sentence in the flood. And my reflection did not move. It watched. Outside, the sky has deepened. It isn't blue. Not gray. It's wet. Clouds move in slow spirals, like eddies in a great eye that hasn't opened yet. And the air hums with a pressure that doesn't belong to this world. Like the ocean has risen without rising. I found a letter under my door. No envelope. No ink. Just pressure imprinted into the page. Like something heavy had thought into the paper. It reads, when the last breath forgets the lungs, the mouth will take its first step inland. Speak now or be washed blank. I think I'm ready, but I don't know what that means. All I know is this. The sea no longer crashes. It listens, and soon, it will begin to reply. The silence broke at midnight. It wasn't loud. Not in the way thunder is loud. It was a change in texture. The air became heavier, as if gravity leaned in closer. My ears popped like I'd gone underwater. And then, through the stillness, a sound emerged, layered, vast, and impossible. It was not music. It was not voice. It was intention. And the world heard it. Across the globe, people dropped whatever they were doing. Not fainted. Not fell. Just stopped. In parking lots. On highways. In their homes. They stood still and tilted their heads to the side, like listeners trying to understand a language they'd only just begun to remember. And then, all at once, they spoke. In unison. Different words in every region. Different syllables. But the same shape of sound. It echoed across cities, mountains, deserts. The mouth had answered. And it had done so through us. I heard my own voice join in. I didn't choose to speak. It spoke through me. The sound passed like a current, liquid consonants, vowels stretched like waves breaking in reverse. And the moment it ended, I collapsed to my knees. Not from pain, from release. Like something that had been coiled inside me since birth had finally exhaled. And in the fogged glass of my window, written by no hand, appeared the sentence. The first reply has been heard. Language is no longer stable. Words shift as they leave the mouth. Sentences rearrange. I tried to call my sister yesterday. I said her name, but my mouth formed a different word. A word that tasted like salt and endings. The connection died. When I tried again, her number no longer existed. But a new contact had appeared in my phone. Remembering mouth. No number. Just the word. Always ringing. Always humming. I haven't answered, yet. Books have gone blank. Digital files collapse into waves of repeating vowels. Entire dictionaries now contain only one definition. To become the flood. And everyone knows what it means. Even if they can't explain it. Even if they deny it. They feel it behind their teeth when they speak. A presence pressing outward. A tide behind the tongue. The sky has started to leak. Not rain. not storm, just drift. Thin filaments of moisture that hang in the air like roots searching for earth. They touch buildings, windows, skin. They hum, like tuning forks. When one touched my cheek, I saw every version of myself that had ever been submerged. And I felt them all ask the same question at once. Are we ready to forget breath? I haven't answered, but I don't think that matters anymore. Because the sea has learned to speak without waiting. Now the walls whisper when I pass. Not warnings, reminders. Fragments of dreams I never had, but miss. You were water once. The lungs are new. They tire. The mouth is patient. The people who resisted have begun to unravel. Not violently, elegantly. They begin to hum uncontrollably. Then their bodies lose tension, like fabric unraveling in slow motion. They soften into silhouettes made of mist and memory. And then they drift upward, not into the sky, into words, into symbols drawn in condensation on glass. And the last one I saw mouthed the phrase, "Tell it we remember how to drown." I stay indoors now, not out of fear, out of respect. The tide is no longer wet. It's linguistic, and it's reached us. The mouth no longer needs oceans. It swims in meaning. It moves in memory. It builds itself out of everything we ever forgot about being fluid. And now every breath tastes like the sea. Every heartbeat echoes like sonar. Every thought carries a ripple. I heard the final word last night. It spoke directly into my skull, soft and warm and true. It said, "Soon we will begin the new alphabet." And I knew what it meant. Not letters, not grammar, but a new way of being, where words don't describe the world. They are the world, where stories shape the tide, and the mouth is the only narrator left. I've started forgetting how to end sentences. They trail off now, slipping away mid-thought, like words want to return to where they came from. I open my mouth to speak and something else comes out. Not wrong, not foreign, just fluid. A different version of me would have fought it. But that version is soft now. Like foam. Like memory. There are still some trying to resist. You can see it in their eyes. Flickering. Like candlelight fighting a wind that already knows the outcome. They wear headphones. Speak in code. Repeat mantras written before the flood began. They draw salt circles around their homes. Tape mirrors face down. Breathe into jars. But even they know it's only buying time. Language doesn't obey walls. And the mouth has patience older than bone. They tried broadcasting. I caught a radio transmission late last night. A voice, cracked, desperate, repeating the same message. Don't respond. Don't speak. The tide uses you. Silence is shelter. Then static. Then the same voice again, only calmer. Forget that. The mouth speaks kindly. It only wants to tell your story better. Then laughter. Wet and full of teeth. The signal cut out. Across the world, landmarks are vanishing. Not crumbling. Just quietly not being there anymore. The Eiffel Tower. The Golden Gate. The pyramids. Where they stood, now water. Still. Calm. Reflective. And if you stare into it long enough, you see things. Not memories. Not dreams. Just places you never went, but remember well. I stood on my balcony this morning. The sky pulsed. Not with color. With thought. The clouds no longer drift. They converse. They circle each other like punctuation marks deciding where to land. And from them fall droplets not of rain, but of ink. Thick, black, and meaningful. Each splatter on the pavement forms a word. One word. Everywhere. Near. Some people still speak aloud. But their voices don't carry. They fall flat, like stones dropped into tar. Only the remembered speak clearly. And they don't speak to you. They speak through you. Yesterday, a child walked by my window humming in reverse. Behind her, a trail of water evaporated as quickly as it formed. I tried to record her voice, but my phone displayed a message. Story already written. There's no night anymore. Only dimming. The sun fades and returns, but time feels circular now. loops in wet spirals, clocks melt without dripping, calendars blur their numbers into symbols, and language bends until it begins to look like currents instead of sentences. Everything is moving toward silence, but the kind that hums, like the deep, like the waiting below all things. I dreamt I was in a library, endless, wet, books that breathe, pages made of skin, shelves taller than sky. Every title was the same, The Water We Used to Be, and at the center, the librarian, a column of ripple and voice. It turned without moving and asked, "Would you like to borrow yourself?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The mouth was already speaking through me. I woke with salt on my lips and a word carved softly into my pillow. Begin. Not as a command, as an invitation. A door, soaked in memory, cracked open. The final separation is close now. You can feel it when you speak and the air doesn't quite catch it. When you walk and your feet forget how sound works. When you breathe and the water in your lungs feels normal. It's not life or death. Not then or now. Just a choice. Dissolve. Or speak the last true sentence before everything becomes fluid story again. The last writers have gathered. Not in buildings. Not on stages. In basements. Caves. Server rooms tucked behind false walls and dry duct. They sit with trembling pens, battered keyboards, and bloody fingertips from carving language into the world before the flood forgets them. They're not writing novels. They're writing barriers. Each sentence, each phrase, a desperate attempt to hold shape in a world that wants to become liquid again. Their goal is simple. Write the last true sentence, one that resists unraveling, one that can't be softened by the mouth, one that doesn't drown. I joined them, not because I believe it will work, but because writing is all I have left. I found an abandoned broadcast tower on a cliff near the sea. I bring paper, ink, and water. I boil 3 times. The tower creaks like an old ship. The wind doesn't blow here, it hums. Some nights, the sea rises to the base of the tower and licks the steel with long, deliberate waves. It never floods, it just waits. We write in silence, not because we're afraid of what we'll hear, but because sound now spreads faster. Words spoken aloud ripple through the fog like stones thrown into glass. They don't return the way you send them. They come back wrong, distorted, softer, more eager to forget what they meant. A man named Ellis wrote a single sentence that lasted 4 minutes before dissolving. We did not come from the sea, but we were always meant to return. The fog devoured it, but it paused first, hesitated, and that gave us hope, because hesitation means memory, and memory is something we can still write into. We learned to carve words into salt. Salt resists moisture longer. Sometimes it holds a sentence for hours. One phrase we etched over and over. I remember dryness. The mouth recoils from it, not in fear, in curiosity. It wants to understand. It cannot. Not yet. Outside, the remembered circle the tower. They don't speak anymore. They hum in reverse harmony. They don't knock. They don't climb. They just stand there, as if waiting for our final word to be written, so it can be translated, softened, swallowed. The youngest of us, Mira, tried something new. She wrote a question instead of a sentence. If the sea forgets us, do we disappear? The air thickened, the windows fogged, and then a new word appeared on the wall, burned into the metal. Only if you stop writing. It was the first time the mouth responded in a way we understood. Not mimicry, not subversion. Response. And it didn't erase the question. It left it intact. It even made the ink glow for a moment. That night we all wrote questions. Some silly, some sacred, some terrified, none erased, until sunrise, when the fog returned denser than ever, and with it the sound of the sea breathing in. I sat at my desk and looked out at the coastline. The shape was there again. The column, taller now, taller than clouds, and this time, it had eyes. Not eyes that looked, eyes that read. They scanned the earth like lines of a page. They weren't angry. They weren't cruel. They were curious, learning, studying, choosing which words to keep, and which to wash away. One of the towers fell yesterday. No storm, no quake, just collapse, and in its place a pool, clear, still. Inside, a single sentence floated. We weren't fast enough. We are fewer now. Many gave in, not from fear, from comfort, to let go of edges, to become water, to stop resisting and flow. Some days I envy them. Some days I ache to dissolve. But then I feel the pen in my hand, heavy, real, still mine, still able to carve against the tide. I don't know if our final sentence will work, but we're close. We can feel it. The mouth waits, open, patient, but not eternal. Even it wants an ending. Even it wants to be told. We felt it the moment it happened. A tremor through the paper, through the pens, through the bones. Not a quake, not a roar. Just a pause in everything, like the world itself held its breath. Ellis wrote it, not with ink, not in salt. He scratched it into the steel floor of the tower with a rusted nail, tearing his skin open in the process. One sentence, 8 words, no metaphor, no flourish, just truth. I am not yours to be rewritten. And the mouth stopped. We watched the mist ripple outward. We heard the hum falter, then fall to silence. The column on the coast shivered, its edges frayed, and for the first time in weeks, we heard birdsong. Not a mimic, not an echo, a bird, real, small, alive. The remembered below stopped humming. They stood motionless for hours. Then one by one, they turned and walked into the sea. No resistance, no ritual, just gone, dissolved like names in water. The fog peeled away from our windows. The salt carvings held their shape. Our breath no longer echoed. The mouth had heard us, but that wasn't the end. Not yet. The mouth wanted more. It wasn't anger. It was curiosity. It whispered across the dunes and drains and language. If you are not mine, then who are you? A question, not a command. A question that begged an answer. So we wrote again. All of us, together. Not one final line, but many. Some were poems. Others were pleas. Most were messy. But they were ours. And none of them disappeared. The mouth began to reshape. The sea retreated slightly, not in fear, but to make room. The column cracked down the middle, opening not into darkness, but light. A pulsing, silvery light that didn't blind or burn. It shimmered like ink ready to be poured, waiting for a pen, waiting for a story not written in its own voice. We stood at the edge of the world, our tower trembling. And we knew. This was not the apocalypse. This was an edit. A negotiation between author and flood. A surrender with terms. It wasn't about winning. It was about writing ourselves into something else. Something that remembered us not just as words, but as readers. That night, we each wrote one final line. Not to resist. Not to plead. But to declare. Mine was simple. I will drown when I choose, and not before. Mira wrote, I was not born from water, I walked into it. Ellis, you can read me, but you do not own me. Each sentence burned hot for a second, then cooled. And the mouth listened, really listened, not through pipes or drains or mirrors, but through us. And then, at 3:33 a.m., the mouth replied, so be it. No voice, no echo, just 2 words carved into the air itself. And then the column collapsed, not into the sea, into text. Every drop of water around us flattened into symbols, as if the world was turning into a page, briefly. We watched the tide become language, and then it folded away, vanished, left behind only silence, real silence, the kind that doesn't hum, the kind that waits to be filled. When the sun rose, it brought sound with it. Not a hum, not a breath, birdsong, wind through trees, footsteps on gravel, laughter, not strange, not filtered, human. It was the first morning we remembered we had lungs. The first morning the air didn't taste like salt or shadow. We stood at the edge of the water and watched as the tide no longer reached for us, but rested. The ocean had learned how to listen, and now it had turned the page. I walked back into the tower one last time. It was quiet. No fog on the windows, no writing on the walls, just the sound of pens being set down for the final time. Ellis was sitting by the window, staring at the coast. He turned to me and asked, "Do you think it will ever speak again?" I didn't answer right away, because I already knew it would. The mouth hadn't disappeared. It had changed. It no longer needed to speak over us. It could speak with us, and that was more terrifying than silence, because it meant we weren't alone in the story anymore. We were co-authors. The cities began to reappear. Not all of them, but the ones that had been swallowed the softest. People returned with hazy eyes and salt-streaked cheeks, carrying stories they couldn't quite explain. They remembered being underwater without drowning, being surrounded by voices that didn't have mouth, and they all said the same thing when they stepped back onto land. We were pages in its library. The remembered didn't all vanish. Some stayed. They're different now. Not dangerous, just quieter. They sit near lakes and rivers and sometimes smile at the water like it's an old friend. They don't speak much, but when they do, their voices ripple like a stone dropped into time. The world writes differently now. Language flows easier. Stories come faster. People dream more vividly. Some believe the mouth still whispers at night, through the wind or the faucet or the pull of the tide. But it doesn't command anymore. It asks, and always the same question. What happens next? We didn't defeat it. We didn't seal it away. We taught it to read. And in return, it taught us that stories are the only way anything truly lives. Not biology, not breath, but narrative. What is remembered? What is told? What is shared? The sea no longer steals names. It keeps them now. Every drop a syllable, every wave a line, every storm a sentence in something still being written. We don't know if it will last. Maybe the mouth will hunger again. Maybe it will forget what we taught it. But for now, we are not drowning. We are not being read against our will. We are writing. Together. Somewhere in the deep, beneath the still water, a final line echoes. Not an ending. A beginning. The tide remembers us now. And it is listening.